And welcome ICS20 folks. Lesson 3 underscore 9. This is our second lesson on selection. And selection we talked about when our programs make decisions. And the last couple of days we've been dealing with an if, else if structure. And we're going to see a different structure today that makes decisions called the case structure. So hopefully you've got a word processing document open. Smart Notebook is fine, but it doesn't have to be. I'm going to maybe zoom out a little bit here so we can see this a bit better. I'm going to have Turing open, and in fact, I think if you look carefully on the website, I attached a program called called Case Structure, and that's it right there. And I'm going to be using that program, so hopefully you have that open somewhere as well. When there are a number of choices in an if else structure, it may be more straightforward to use the case structure. So for instance, in the warm-up today, you had the user enter what level they got, and you outputted a percent. And because there was a whole bunch of options, it was if, else if, else if, else if, else if, and that sort of thing. There were a lot of options. And this structure that we're about to see is a little more straightforward. Here's the general syntax. And again, this general syntax looks a bit weird because it doesn't have actual values in here. So case variable. Variable is just like it says, some variable in our program. Like it would have been mark or level in your warm-up program. Label, and then whatever value this would be. So statements executed if variable equals value 1. So if variable is equal to label 1, then these statements would be executed. Okay? Or value 2 or value 3, and we can have as many labels as we want. Notice the keywords here are label, case, and of are all keywords in Turing, and when we get to the example, you see that they're those thick black bold letters. That's that's what the keywords in Turing are. Notice that the label has a colon there. It's used to show that this is the statements we're going to execute if variable equals value 1. And what's nice about this is we can have almost like a default value. This is kind of like the else. So if none of these work, if variable doesn't take any of these values, we can kind of have a default value. And this will be executed if none of the others fit. And then we end the case structure with an end case in similar way that we ended the end if with end if. So here is the example, and I should have done this before I started up my video here, but oh well. I'm going to change the font just so you can read it a little bit better again. Okay. So, and you've got this code that you'll be able to play with. It's going to read in a level, and then it's going to, you see, case mark, where that's our variable, and then a label, a level of 1 will assign a percent of 55, and 2 is a percent of 65. And if none of those work, we figure that the person failed and they get 39. And notice then the output section, your mark is percent, and then that right there was, I don't know why that's there. We don't need it. Delete. So I'm going to run this to see how it works. What level did you get? So if I put in 3, your mark is 35%. So that mark goes there, and then it says, oh, I'm going to execute that statement, and then it assigns percent as 75, and this is like a conversion program. Now notice what happens here if I run this. What level did you get? And I put in an R. I get an error message, invalid integer input. Well, of course, R isn't an integer, and if I set it up as an integer, then that doesn't work. So notice I could read in a character if I want to, and mark could be a character. Now, if I were to run this, it would give an error message because none of these labels, it says case alternative label is the wrong type. You're Turing saying, well, you told me it was going to be a character, but then you got these integers here. So I'd have to change these all um, to characters. Character 1, character 2, character 3, character 4. And so now my program will read this in as a character instead of an integer. So it works. Your mark is 39. Notice that if I put in something else like a T, it's still going to say I got 39. But maybe I'd want to fix my program there. Notice that I could have mark be a string as well. I could have a case of a string, and there's going to be some exercises that allows you to work on that. So what I want you to do is get a copy of this example into your notes. Um, you could just say see the Turing program case structure, but it's nice to have an example in there that matches. I do have some more notes I want to make about this lesson. So notes. It says you can put several values for each label. So for instance, um, in my program, if I wanted to, if I wanted to say that was a 5 or a 6 or something like that, and this doesn't make quite much sense in this program, but if I put a 5 here now, it's going to say that's a percent of 90. And so I just list off all of the labels there, and that works just fine. I separate the different values with commas, and all is good. So there, example, label 1, 2, 3. This is if they were integers, right? This was if the variable was integers when we had our mark coming in as an integer. Under quotes, that would be character. It says you can use character, integer, and string for the case structure. Notice we can't use real numbers. We can't use real numbers, but we can use those variable types. And we saw character and integer in use, and then I think in the exercises you're going to get to use strings. Remember, strings are like words that are in between quotes. You can't use ranges. So, for example, this sort of thing where mark is less than 60 and mark is greater than 50, that doesn't work. You can't do that sort of thing. That's what the if structure is good for. So when would we use one or another? Well, we'd use if and then an if-else structure. If there's only two possibilities, it makes more sense to do that. I'd use an if-else-if structure if I need a compound condition like this, where there's a range of values that are possible. Or if I want to make my decisions more complicated, I'd have to use an if-else-if. A case structure, though, like we've seen today, is much more straightforward if there are just a few, I don't know, 5, 4 choices that are clear that I can list like this, okay? Where there's just a few choices and not a million different choices. Okay, that's all I wanted to say about the case structure. Hopefully you got the note okay. Make sure you save up your note in your notes folder, and the case exercises are up next.